On warm summer nights, the city of Orlando often hums with life. Music drifts through open doors, lights shimmer across quiet streets, and people gather to share moments of joy. In June of 2016, one such night began, like many others, filled with laughter, music, and dancing. But this night, a night that started in celebration, would be remembered forever as one of sorrow. The place was called Pulse, a nightclub that had become a sanctuary for many. It was a space where people felt safe, loved, and free. And it was here that a tragedy unfolded, one that would ripple far beyond the walls of the club, touching hearts across the world. Tonight, as we softly revisit the story of Pulse, we do so with care, like telling a bedtime story, not to frighten, but to remember, not to dwell on violence, but to honor the lives that were lived. We move slowly, gently, through the memories of that night and those it affected, holding space for grief, but also for light, because the story of Pulse is not only about loss, it is also about resilience, unity, and the enduring power of love. Pulse was not just a building. To those who came through its doors, it was family, founded by Barbara Poma in memory of her brother who had passed away from AIDS. The nightclub was envisioned as a tribute to life and love. Its very name, Pulse, was chosen to remind everyone of the beating heart of those lost too soon. It was meant to be a place where people could laugh, dance, and celebrate without fear. For the LGBTQ+ community in Orlando, it was more than a club. It was a safe space in a world where acceptance was not always guaranteed. Inside its walls, people could simply be themselves, holding hands, smiling openly, and dancing without judgment. Those who came to Pulse brought with them their stories. Many were young, in their 20s, just beginning their journeys through life. Some were students, balancing classes with part-time jobs. Others were parents, working hard to support their children. There were aspiring dancers, nurses, teachers, and artists. Some had recently fallen in love, their faces glowing with the quiet happiness of new romance. Others were longtime friends who came week after week to enjoy each other's company. Each person had dreams, laughter, and memories. Each one was someone's child, someone's friend, someone's beloved. On June 12th, 2016, a Saturday night, Pulse hosted Latin Night, a weekly celebration that drew people from across the city. The music was lively, the rhythm contagious, and the energy warm. Guests dressed in their favorite clothes, shared drinks, and gathered on the dance floor, moving together to the beat. For many, it was the highlight of their week. Couples swayed close, friends shouted lyrics joyfully, and newcomers found themselves welcomed into the crowd. It was, in every way, a night of togetherness. Yet, as midnight passed, the joy inside was met by darkness outside. A man, carrying anger and weapons, approached the club. Without warning, the celebration was shattered. What had been laughter and music turned to chaos and fear. In those terrible moments, 49 lives were taken. 53 others were wounded. Families who had gone to bed peacefully that evening would wake to phone calls that no parent, no sibling, no friend should ever receive. The details of that night are painful, and so we will not linger on them. What matters most is the stillness that followed, the silence where music once played, and the heartbreaking truth that so many lives were cut short. In the hours after the tragedy, news spread quickly. Orlando awoke in disbelief. Across the country and the world, people asked why. Who was the man who had brought violence into a place of joy. Investigators began their work immediately, tracing his actions, searching for motives. At first, there were questions of terrorism. During the attack, the man had pledged allegiance to extremist groups. For a time, investigators explored whether he had direct connections to those organizations. Early leads suggested a larger network. But as the investigation continued, it became clear that he had acted alone. His past revealed a man troubled, filled with anger, and drawn to ideologies of hate. Survivors told their stories with courage. They spoke of how quickly the night had changed, how acts of kindness and bravery emerged even in moments of terror. Friends shielded friends. Strangers helped one another escape. Many recalled the sound of music, followed by silence, and then the determination to survive. Their voices were heavy with grief, but steady with strength. Through them, the world learned not just about tragedy, but about resilience. The breakthrough moment in the investigation was not a single discovery, but rather a realization that this act of violence was not just an attack on individuals, but on a community. It was an attempt to silence love, joy, and identity. But instead of silence, what followed was an outpouring of compassion. Vigils were held around the world. In Orlando, thousands gathered in front of the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, candles in hand, their flames flickering in the night. Names of the victims were read aloud. Each name carried a story, a life, a legacy. The crowd stood in stillness, united in grief but also in love. Cities across the globe lit their landmarks in rainbow colors. From New York to Paris, from London to Sydney, skylines glowed as a tribute to those lost. People who had never set foot in Orlando wept, sent letters, and prayed for healing. Strangers became allies. The LGBTQ+ community, though shaken, found new strength in unity. The world chose to remember not just the horror of the night, but the beauty of the lives that were lived. Justice, in the legal sense, was swift. The man responsible was killed during the police response that same night. But true justice was harder to define. No act of law could bring back the laughter of the 49 souls. No sentence could fill the emptiness left in families' hearts. Instead, justice became something softer, something carried in memory and action. It became the memorials created, the scholarships funded, the conversations started. It became the ongoing fight for acceptance, for equality, and for safety. The victims, though gone, were not forgotten. Each one left behind a story. There was Amanda Alver, just 25 years old, who loved fashion and dreamed of becoming a nurse. There was Stanley Almodovar, a 23-year-old pharmacy technician, remembered for his playful spirit. There was Brenda Lee Marquez McCool, a mother of 11, who had survived cancer twice and died protecting her son. There was Eddie Justice, who sent loving text messages to his mother in his final moments. Each name was attached to a face, a family, a dream. 49 people, each unique, each deeply loved. To speak their names was to honor them. To remember their stories was to keep them alive. Over time, Orlando began to heal, though healing did not mean forgetting. At the Pulse site, a memorial grew. People left flowers, letters, photographs, and rainbow flags. The walls became covered in messages of love, written in every language. Plans were made for a permanent memorial and museum, a place where future generations could come to learn and to remember. Barbara Poma, the club's founder, promised that Pulse would remain a place of healing and love, even in its absence as a nightclub. For the families, healing was a long journey. Birthdays came and went without their children. Holidays felt emptier, but many chose to honor their loved ones by continuing their dreams. Scholarships were created in their names. Charities were formed. Some families spoke publicly, turning grief into advocacy. Others held quiet memorials, choosing silence and prayer. Each found their own way to keep memory alive. For survivors, life moved forward with scars, both visible and unseen. Some struggled with survivors' guilt, asking why they had lived when their friends had not. Others found strength in speaking out, telling their stories again and again so the world would never forget. Their resilience became a testament to the human spirit. Even in the face of unimaginable loss, they carried hope. As the years passed, the legacy of Pulse became clearer. It was not defined solely by tragedy, but by love. It became a symbol, a reminder of the importance of safe spaces, of acceptance, of community. It reminded the world that love, in all its forms, deserves protection and celebration. The LGBTQ plus community, though wounded, grew stronger. Pride events that year were filled with tributes to Orlando. Rainbow flags waved higher, held with even more determination. The message was clear: love will always outshine hate. And so, as we close this gentle telling of the Pulse story, we do so with reflection. Yes, it was a night of sorrow, but it was also a night that revealed the resilience of humanity. The lives lost were not defined by their final moments, but by the joy, the laughter, the dreams they carried. On a cold December morning in 2012, the small town of Newtown, Connecticut, woke up to what seemed like an ordinary day. Parents prepared their children for school, buses rolled down quiet streets, and the holiday season was just around the corner. But within hours, this peaceful town would become the center of one of the most horrifying tragedies in American history. The events that unfolded inside Sandy Hook Elementary School that day would not only claim innocent lives, but also leave scars on a nation, sparking debates about gun violence, mental health, and security that still continue more than a decade later. It was a day when childhood innocence was shattered, when safety inside a classroom was violently torn away, and when the name Sandy Hook would forever be etched into collective memory. Sandy Hook Elementary was like many schools across the country. It stood in a suburban neighborhood, surrounded by trees and modest homes, serving hundreds of young children between kindergarten and fourth grade. Parents trusted that when their children walked through its doors, they would be safe, cared for, and nurtured. The teachers were beloved in their community, known for their dedication and warmth. Many of the students were just beginning their journey in education, learning to read, write, and make friends. For them, the world was still a place of wonder. For the teachers, it was their mission to protect that sense of innocence. But no one could have predicted the terror that would invade those classrooms that morning. Among the victims were 20 first-grade students, all between 6 and 7 years old. Their lives had only just begun. They were children who loved art, music, and playing outside. Some dreamed of being firefighters, doctors, or teachers. Their parents described them as full of laughter and curiosity, bundles of energy with unique personalities that made every day special. Alongside them were 6 educators who gave their lives trying to protect their students. They were teachers, administrators, and staff members who, in their final moments, displayed courage and sacrifice. Their stories remind us that even in the darkest moments of humanity, there can still be acts of bravery and love. The shooter, a 20-year-old man named Adam Lanza, had grown up in Newtown. His early life was marked by difficulties, including struggles with social interaction and mental health challenges. Over the years, he became increasingly isolated, retreating into a world of violent video games, online forums, and disturbing obsessions. He lived with his mother, Nancy Lanza, who tried her best to support him, but also kept a collection of firearms in their home. Their relationship was complicated, marked by love, but also by growing distance. On the morning of December 14th, 2012, Adam turned on the person closest to him. Before heading to the school, he shot and killed his mother as she lay in bed. She was his first victim, and her death marked the beginning of the rampage that would soon follow. Just after 9:30 a.m., Adam drove his mother's car to Sandy Hook Elementary, carrying with him an arsenal of weapons, including a Bushmaster XM-15E, 2S rifle, and handguns. He was dressed in black clothing and wore a bulletproof vest. He approached the school, which had recently upgraded its security system, including locked doors and cameras. But within moments, he forced his way inside by shooting through a glass panel near the entrance. The sound of gunfire echoed through the halls, shattering the morning calm. What happened next unfolded in a matter of minutes, but would alter countless lives forever. The first 911 calls began flooding in. Teachers locked classroom doors, pulled children into bathrooms and closets, and tried to keep them quiet. The gunman moved swiftly through the school, targeting the first grade classrooms. Inside those rooms, chaos erupted. Some children managed to escape, running out of the school in tears. Others were shielded by their teachers, who did everything in their power to protect them. Principal Dawn Hochsprung and school psychologist Mary Sherlock confronted the shooter in an attempt to stop him. Both were killed instantly, their bravery a testament to their dedication. Teacher Victoria Soto hid her students in a closet, telling the gunman that they were in the gym. She was murdered for her defiance, but many of her students survived because of her selfless act. Another teacher, Lauren Rousseau, tried desperately to keep her class calm, but she too lost her life. The courage of these educators remains one of the most powerful elements of the story, a reminder that even in moments of terror, humanity shines through. Within minutes, police officers arrived at the scene, racing toward the sound of gunfire. By this point, the shooter had taken the lives of 26 people inside the school. As the police closed in, Adam Lanza turned one of his handguns on himself, ending his own life before he could be apprehended. The silence that followed was eerie, broken only by the cries of survivors and the chaos of first responders trying to secure the building. In less than 11 minutes, an entire community had been torn apart. Parents rushed to the school, desperate for news, their faces filled with fear and disbelief. Some were reunited with their children. Others were led to a nearby firehouse, where they would learn that their loved ones would never come home again. The grief that filled that firehouse was unbearable. Families clung to each other, screaming, crying, and collapsing as the weight of the tragedy settled in. The investigation began immediately. Authorities searched Adam Lance's home, uncovering a chilling collection of evidence. They found multiple firearms, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and writings that revealed his disturbing mindset. He had been planning the attack for months, studying past mass shootings and keeping meticulous notes. Investigators pieced together his reclusive lifestyle, noting how he had withdrawn from society, avoided social interaction, and communicated mostly through online platforms. His digital footprint was filled with dark content, violent fantasies, and obsessions with previous school shootings. There were no accomplices. This massacre was the work of one deeply troubled individual who had turned his anger and isolation into an act of unimaginable violence. At first, investigators struggled to understand his motive. There was no clear reason why he chose Sandy Hook Elementary, no personal connection to the school or its staff. Some believed he targeted the most vulnerable victims to maximize shock and devastation. Others speculated that his actions were driven by a desire for infamy, to make his name known alongside other mass shooters. But in the end, the question of why remained largely unanswered. What was clear was that a perfect storm of mental health struggles, access to firearms, and social isolation had converged in a way that ended in devastation. As details emerged, the nation was left reeling. The images of grieving parents, tiny coffins, and a shattered school community dominated headlines. President Barack Obama addressed the nation in tears, calling for action to prevent such tragedies. The massacre reignited debates about gun control, mental health care, and school security. For many, Sandy Hook was the tipping point. The idea that 6 and 7-year-old children could be gunned down in their classrooms was too much to bear. Vigils were held across the country. Candles were lit. Prayers were offered. And communities far beyond Newtown grieved as though the victims were their own. But grief soon turned into anger and frustration. Many demanded stronger gun laws, including universal background checks and bans on assault weapons. In Connecticut, lawmakers passed some of the strictest gun control measures in the nation, including limits on magazine capacity and expanded background checks. Families of the victims became advocates, speaking out for change. Some created foundations in memory of their children, working to promote school safety and mental health awareness. But on the national stage, political divisions remained sharp. Despite widespread outrage, significant federal gun reform failed to pass, leaving many families feeling as though their loved ones had died in vain. The aftermath of Sandy Hook also saw an outpouring of conspiracy theories. Some individuals cruelly claimed that the massacre had been staged, that the victims were actors, and that it was part of a government plot to push gun control. These baseless claims added insult to unimaginable grief, forcing families to defend the reality of their loss. Lawsuits were filed against some of the conspiracy theorists, leading to public reckonings and financial penalties. The resilience of the families who stood up against harassment while continuing to honor their children's memories became yet another layer of this complex story. In the years since the tragedy, Sandy Hook has become a symbol. It represents the vulnerability of schools, the fragility of life, and the urgency of addressing violence in society. For survivors, the trauma never fully goes away. Children who escaped that day grew up with memories no child should ever carry. Teachers returned to classrooms forever changed. Parents marked birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries with an empty chair at the table. Yet amid the pain, there has also been resilience. The community of Newtown came together, supporting one another through unimaginable sorrow. Memorials were built, names were etched in stone, and the victims' legacies were preserved in countless acts of remembrance. The crime itself was over in minutes, but its impact will last for generations. It forced Americans to confront uncomfortable truths about gun access, mental illness, and safety in public spaces. It challenged lawmakers, educators, and parents to rethink what it means to protect children. And it left behind haunting questions. Questions about what could have been done differently, about whether the tragedy could have been prevented, and about how to ensure it never happens again. As we reflect on Sandy Hook, it is not just the horror of the act that lingers, but the lives that were lost. 20 children who never got to grow up. 6 educators who gave everything to protect their students. A mother who lost her life before the massacre even began. Each of them had stories, dreams, and futures that were stolen in an instant. Their absence is felt every day, not only by their families, but by an entire nation that mourns them still. Thank you so much for watching the video. Good night.